ladies and gentlemen, our party chairwoman, could you give a warm round of applause for Dolores Cahill?
Good evening, everyone. Dolores Cahill is my name. My interest in this is I have some key issues which would be around sovereignty, democracy, freedom of speech and return of Irish neutrality. Yes. So like all of you, my journey started after when I voted no for the Nice Treaty, and I have felt betrayed ever since when they made us vote again. I think it was shocking, and I think since then really the European Union has lost its legitimacy, and I think it was a travesty. Thank you. I also voted no for the second Nice referendum, and I also thought it was a travesty that we were conned by whatever the 7.8 billion that was brought home. Yeah, we sold ourselves out. So then also again for the Lisbon Treaty and the secondary votes. What I just wanted to say is that we probably are the silent majority, because any time, if you look at it, where there are referendums in countries where the European Union comes under the spotlight, like Ireland for Nice, where the majority voted no, and then when they introduced this Constitution of Europe, they said if any one country votes no, the Constitution won't go ahead. And in the Netherlands, they voted no, and they said, okay, we'll go again, and they went to France, and France voted no, and then they made very minor changes in Ireland, and we voted no, but they brought it in anyway as the Lisbon Treaty. So I think that is shocking. It's absolutely shocking, and that people in Europe are waking up. And obviously the clampdown that we have now in Ireland on freedom of speech, that we have all of the media are owned by small numbers of people, and RTE is only giving one side of the story, as we all know. I have decided that, this new party as well will take people from the left, right and centre. This is really an issue to regain Ireland's sovereignty and that we have democracy. And if this party survives, great, but if after we regain our sovereignty there are other parties that come up, or the existing parties like right, left and centre, that's fine. This is really an issue to just bring the debate about, is the future vision of Europe for the next 5, 10, 20 years. It's not looking back, it's what have we seen, how has it impacted our lives in the last 10 years. There is no discussion on the 10th anniversary of the banking crisis. There's no open debate about how the banks, even though the ECB is lending a whole lot of money in quantitative easing, that the banks on the ground are not lending money to small businesses. And this is not against what the ordinary people want. And also, in Ireland, practically now, it doesn't almost make sense to work. If you are a small business or a small farmer, the bureaucracy is so overloaded, and then when you actually try and do something, you have a huge amount of pressure. But it's almost like in a collectivist communist system that the state has decided to encroach in our lives in every single way, so that they almost want us to give up the idea that we would work for ourselves and that we would have control over our own futures. And I suppose in a very idealistic way, when Thomas Jefferson was writing the Declaration of Independence, that really he was saying we want life, liberty and freedom to prosper, right? And that's really, there are two ideologies going on under our eyes, is that the European Union institutions are almost the state trying to encroach in our lives to tell us what we are doing. And there is no democracy, right? There is no democracy. All the laws are only enshrined by the European Commission, and the Parliament has no authority or legal right to actually initiate legislation. So just because they call it a Parliament, it's again a rewording of something. We have really no power. And as we saw in referenda, when we voted to change things, they completely ignore us. So really the whole thing has lost its legitimacy. So I think what we have to think is that we are probably on the right side of history. Right? That we probably are the silent majority. And I have worked on the Government Advisory Science Council Research and Innovation and in the EU working on policy. So when I did work in the European Commission, I was on the unit for the global coordination of research and innovation. So you would look globally and say South Korea is 40 years ahead in health or nanotechnology, ICT or whatever, and where Ireland is in Europe. And what I would like to do in this is to develop kind of policies that would, if there is an opportunity in 1 year, in 5 years, in 20 years, that we would have a vision for what will happen when the European institutions fall. Because we don't know what the future is, but there is potentially in the next 10 or 20 years, and this party is a forum, so that if people all over Ireland can build their own commons and at least stand people for election, to stand for local elections, to stand in a general election, to stand for the European Parliament, so that there is an alternative voice. And if anyone is out there, I would love to start a radio station, that somebody like John Waters or, could actually have an opportunity between, 9 and 10 or 10 and 11 or whoever we can get, so that people who only have access to radios, like elderly people or rural people or whatever, who mightn't have internet access or mightn't be on social media, can actually have an alternative. So there's a quote I just wanted to read you from R. Buckminster Fuller, and he said, "In order to change an existing paradigm, you do not struggle to try and change the problematic model or system. You create a new model and make the old model obsolete." And so what I would like to do, at the minute we have very weak policies, right? It's really just a few of us and you, so fair play to you for coming here today, that I would like to articulate a vision where actually, if you work, people have more dignity, and you provide for your family, and you provide for your children. And of course we all want to pay tax to contribute to people when they can't work. But is it absolutely ridiculous that people who work actually in effect have less money than people who don't work? That's just a crazy model. And if you look at history, okay, so we all know, but of course they've taken history off one of the, in secondary school. But if you trace back history for when the Roman Republic, where they were elected and small government, how it slowly slipped when they changed the currency to have this thing where you just give them bread and circuses, and the people didn't work and the whole thing collapsed. So this has happened. You can see if you were going to go to Korea, would you want to go to North Korea or South Korea? The same. Venezuela was a country like Ireland was previously, and now because the system changed so that people couldn't work. So if you are a nation, the things that you need to have is control over your money, control over your taxes, and that you elect the people that make the laws that you have to live by. So, when we put our heads above the parapet, they're going to say we're whatever, alt-right or right or whatever. But really, all we want is the power that if we elect people, that they make our laws. And I'm sure, as you know, the European Union now, European Union laws are superior to Irish laws. Okay? And that our Supreme Court isn't supreme anymore. And I'll just read you from Professor Anthony Coughlin's document, just so you know. This is just the number of rules that we have. So in 2016, there was 123,000 EU rules affecting Ireland. These included 1,600 EU directives, 12,915 regulations, 15,500 decisions, 5,300 international agreements, 16,000 EU court verdicts, and 71,000 international standards from EU bodies. That's crazy. And when I worked in the European Commission, I wanted to change. I know a little bit about HR, the EU Working Act, and I had a secretary that had 2 children under 2. And I wanted her to be able to come at 7 and leave at 3, and they just blocked me every step of the way. But I knew, because I think that this is crazy, even though you work there are a lot of crazy rules. And eventually HR wrote to me and said that all EU regulations only apply to member states. They don't apply to the European Commission. So that they didn't apply. And so there were people there on 14 short-term contracts, right? So in Europe, if you have a number of short-term contracts, you can become permanent. They had multiple short-term contracts, but all of the EU regulations did not apply to the European Commission. So you have unelected bureaucrats who have salaries better than most people and pensions. They are not electable, they are not accountable, and they are spewing out legislation that they don't have to abide by. And when I worked there, I have tried to say, could we not have a directorate for regulatory coherence, Okay, so say if you're involved in an area like diagnostics and drug trials that come across both sets of regulations, that there should be something to, like if you're in food or in agriculture, or if you're running a B&B and you have food and health and safety, there should be really one facing agency that faces the small business owner. No. There are like all different regulations and they contradict each other. So I would just say my main interest in this party is to regain Ireland's sovereignty, democracy, right to freedom of speech, and have our neutrality respected. And then whatever happens, whatever political parties on the right, left or centre, that's fine after that. But that's why I have decided to step up, and I'm very honoured to be the chairperson of this party. Because I'm sure there's a question, I have never been, while I've been politically aware my whole life, I've never been a member of any political party, and I am a member of Irish Freedom Party.